Last week, we talked a little bit about Ursaluna, specifically the new Blood Moon form of Ursaluna that we have been introduced to in Kitakami, in Scarlet and Violet's DLC, the Teal Mask. We also, in a different video, talked about the mysterious fourth Pokemon that seems to be at play with the Loyal 3, a Pokemon that is behind the Loyal 3 and kind of, calling shots from somewhere. Well, believe it or not, these two seemingly unrelated stories may all tie in together in the Indigo Disc, or, even if it's not explained that they do, they very well may be tied together. Welcome back to the Lumiose Post, where we talk about all things Pokemon, and today we're going to be talking about how Ursaluna went from this to this, because this is a very drastic change. We touched on this a bit, like I said, in a video last week, where basically I just talked about how we know that this isn't a regional form in the same way that like Sandshrew and Alolan Sandshrew are, because that happens over multiple generations, but this is some kind of version of that, just a much smaller version, because instead it is one Ursaluna, not its lineage, but one Ursaluna that changed. And the question is, how did it change? Because it's kind of strange, right? A lot about this Pokemon changed. Not only did it get some appearance changes, but it also even got a signature move and even changed its own stats. It is now a special attacker, not a physical attacker. So it's just weird that there was such a drastic change to Ursaluna from this. And I previously proposed that it could have been something related to a Blood Moon. That makes sense because the Pokemon is indeed a Blood Moon form of Ursaluna. And it's not crazy to believe either, because we do know that Ursaluna is a Pokemon that has evolved due to the moon. Ursaring, you have to give it peat blocks during a full moon. So it's not very hard for me to believe a Pokemon that is influenced by one of the moon's phases could also be influenced by an eclipse. But I think that there may be a little more than that. There definitely is some of the Blood Moon at play, I think, but I think that there's more to this, because we were told by Perrin that this Ursaluna swam over from Sinnoh back when Sinnoh was called Hisui. So we are talking about, at least a couple hundred years. Assuming that, looking at the era that Hisui seems to be based off in the real world, we can assume it's been a couple hundred years between Legends Arceus and the modern, present Pokemon times. That's what we can assume. Now, of course, we do have to preface that with Pokemon is not one-to-one to our real world, so this could very well be way further back. In fact, you could argue that it is, because the Sinnoh region is so drastically different from Hisui that seems to be something that would have to take place over way longer than just a couple hundred years. But either way, a couple hundred years is still too long, in my opinion, for a Pokemon like Ursaluna to be able to live. Now, there are Pokemon that do live forever, right? Like, there are Pokemon that really do live forever, but there are also some that live over thousands of years and, hundreds of years. But I just don't think that the Teddiursa line is one of these Pokemon, because they don't really have a supernatural element until now with this Blood Moon. So we go back to what the heck happened here, and how does the fourth Mon and the Loyal 3 tie into it? And don't worry, we'll get into all of it. But first off, this Ursaluna, we have to talk about what it's been through specifically. If it swam from Sinnoh to Kitakami, looking at real-world locations, that means that it kind of swam from, like, Hokkaido to Tohoku, which isn't too far, but it's still impressive. Like, it's definitely impressive. Then not only that, but it arrived here, and, well, it's a different environment. It's clearly been through some stuff. Something happened to its eye. I imagine that this Ursaluna was dying. After the trek of swimming over here, you have to think Ursaluna is a ground-type Pokemon, and the anime seems to suggest that rock and ground types and fire types not only are weak to water-type moves, but also hate water because of that. So if that is true, then we can assume that this Ursaluna, after swimming across an ocean, is in bad shape. So here it is in Kitakami. It is just, you know, it's on the verge of death, and obviously it's made this trek. It wants to keep going on. There's nothing it wants more than to ensure its survival. Well, there's a Pokemon that can grant it exactly that. You see, one thing we talked about in our video was how the Loyal 3 seem to have all had their wishes granted. Okidogi wished for strength, Pheasantipity wished for beauty, and Munkidori wished for intelligence. They seem to have gotten this all from the Toxic Chain, which was given to them by a fourth Pokemon that you can kind of see in one of the shots of Ogerpon's backstory. But that's just important to know. This Pokemon seems to have the ability to grant strength, grant intelligence, grant beauty. It also seems to be involved with the Loyal 3's resurrection that we see in the Teal Mask story. So it also seems to be involved with manipulating death. So I imagine that this Pokemon encountered Ursaring, or Ursaluna rather, and granted it immortality, because for this Pokemon to live that long, he obviously had to reach immortality, and he happens to be in an area where we know there is a Pokemon that can grant this, right? So it kind of all does click together, because while I do think that it's possible that the Blood Moon, an eclipse, could change Ursaluna's form from a Full Moon Ursaluna to a Blood Moon Ursaluna, I just find it a little hard to believe that, for one, that would be instantaneous. Like, just, there'd be a lunar eclipse and Ursaluna just changes, like, as if it evolved, you know? I doubt it's like that. And then for two, I also don't think that would grant it immortality. It just would, at best, change its form. I think that this Pokemon maybe somehow used Ursaluna's connection to the moon to allow it to take hold of the lunar eclipse that maybe was going on at the time, and use that power to, you know, change its form, but then also it granted it immortality in the same way that it granted Okidogi, Pheasantipity, and Munkidori the ability to rise from the dead. Now, the one hole with this whole theory is that we know that the Toxic Chain seems to also change personality a little bit. Like we see with Kieran, he seems to have this Pokemon's influence onto him and is getting stronger from this Pokemon, but like as a trainer, but is also kind of becoming a darker person. You know, he's not the sweet, friendly kid he once was. And Ursaluna doesn't seem to have gone through this change, or does it? We do see that the Ursaluna appears to be calm. Normal Full Moon Ursaluna appear to be pretty calm. Like, you know, in fact, they almost look depressed when you see them in Legends Arceus. Like, they're not super happy, they're not super angry, grumpy Pokemon. But this Ursaluna kind of is. You know, you see it wander out, and when it gets, you know, caught by Perrin's camera's flash, it rampages. It's furious, and you have to battle it right now to take it down. And I do think it's also important to note that when you battle the Ursaluna, it has a full health bar, like a big health bar like a Titan Pokemon, very similar to how the Loyal 3 had that. So maybe that's another connection to it receiving some power from this mysterious fourth Loyal 3 member. Furthermore, Ursaluna was given the name by, like, the people of Kitakami, the Blood Moon Beast. And I doubt that they would go with the name Beast if it was this friendly Pokemon. Now, that said, in fairness, it seems that the people of Kitakami are very big on judging books by their cover, based off of them seeing Ogerpon and going, it's a hideous, evil ogre. So maybe that is what happened. But either way, this Ursaluna seems to have a minor temper tantrum. So I think that, yeah, it did influence a little bit. And there is a good chance that just since it's been so long since Ursaluna was granted this power by the fourth Pokemon, then it probably has worn off by now, you know? The only reason it hasn't with the Loyal 3, I think, is because this Pokemon still is clearly taking a hold of them, you know, as it was involved in the resurrection process. And plus, while these Pokemon have been around for hundreds of years, the Loyal 3, well, they haven't been alive for hundreds of years. You know, they've actually been dead for a really long time and were just resurrected. So perhaps their clock, if you will, is still going. But it seems Ursaluna's has expired. But yeah, I think this is really interesting. It also is interesting how Ursaluna has some supernatural elements connected to the Ghost type now. It can now hit Ghost types with normal and fighting moves, which is also just something that, you know, again, tying it to a ghost type, I feel like this Pokemon could be connected to this mysterious fourth Pokemon, as we are thinking it could be a ghost type Pokemon. This also is kind of maybe given some credit to, because if you look in the data mine of the games, they can see that Perrin will return in the Indigo Disc, and if that is true, perhaps they'll tie her into this whole big story that's going on with the fourth Loyal 3 Pokemon, because I imagine it will appear there, and maybe she'll even make comments on, hey, you know, maybe this Pokemon is the creation behind the Bloodmoon Beast. You know, I think that there's just too many coincidences for this to not maybe be something. I know it's not a super concrete, like, you cannot dispute this theory. It's definitely not that, but there's just a lot of little points here and there that I think are interesting, and, you know, maybe it's a coincidence, but I've come to figure that multiple coincidences usually aren't a coincidence. But yeah, let me know what you think of this. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss all of our future videos. And until next time, I will see all of you later.